Hello and welcome to Marks & Clark's Blurred Lines podcast series. I'm Robecca Davey, Chartered Trademark Attorney and Senior Associate at Marks & Clark, and throughout this series we'll delve into intriguing and evolving subjects in the intersection of fashion and intellectual property for 2024. Our discussions will span diverse topics such as the rise of NFTs, the expansive world of the metaverse, and the pivotal role of AI in shaping the industry. Each episode will feature insights from a spectrum of experts in the fashion realm, along with special guests from within Marks & Clark, providing unique perspectives on these compelling themes. So without further delay, let's embark on this week's episode. Welcome. Today we're going to be discussing AI and fashion. We're going to go back to the basics and understand exactly what generative AI is, its impact and uses in the fashion industry, and what all of this means in relation to intellectual property. My name is Becca Davey. I'm a Senior Associate and Trademark Attorney at Marks & Clark. Marks & Clark are a global intellectual property law firm. Today, I'm co-hosting with Joh of Spatial 8. Joh, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Becca. And my name is Joh. I'm the CEO of Spatial 8. We're a metaverse concierge for brands looking to get into the metaverse, XR, and spatial computing. So we're here to help you with your business needs.
Thank you so much. So today we are so lucky to have Franki with us. Franki, it's an honor to have you here. Please tell us a bit about you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Franki, I'm based in London, and I'm the founder of Fashion AI, which is a really big community of AI fashion enthusiasts who use tools like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion to come up with really cool new fashion designs. And we also have an agency and studio that helps fashion brands start to incorporate AI and generative AI into their workflows.
Thank you so much. So, Franki, I think it'd be really interesting and useful to set up our conversation with going right back to the basics. What is generative AI? What does it mean in terms of fashion?
Yeah, absolutely. So generative AI, you might know tools on the market like Midjourney or ChatGPT. It's basically a process where you have training data, you've got an AI model, and then you've got the output, which is known as synthetic data or synthetic media. So in the case of fashion, the training data might be lots of images of fashion, and then you've got an AI model, and then you would prompt that model, and that's known as prompt engineering. So you write text saying, I want to see a supermodel wearing a Givenchy red dress, and then it would generate that based on all of the training data.
So, Franki, do you think that the pandemic has really pushed this along? Like, what was it like pre-pandemic? Do you think the pandemic, obviously everyone being at home, has pushed that along, accelerated the progression of AI and its integration into the fashion world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely saw a shift during the COVID-19 period. Everyone was online. Before it was mainly, young people connecting and socializing online in maybe games, and suddenly you had professionals who were using Zoom, and brands starting to look really seriously at using the metaverse and games as a social platform for people to connect. And as we move from social networks where you've got a profile, you've got, your CV, to metaverse experiences, you then need to think about your avatar. And an extension of your avatar is how you dress your avatar. So very much moving from these 3D worlds as gamers and dressing your avatar game character in a skin to then thinking about how do I turn up to a meeting with my avatar that's representative of me in the professional world, or how do I meet my friends, and we're going to go for more, so you'll have different contexts and different fashion to reflect yourself in those worlds.
Right. Yeah, actually, Demo, in the last 2 episodes of this webinar, he did the interview with his avatar. I'm not as cool as Demo, so it's just me in the flesh. But still, exactly to your point. Okay, so obviously you're betting on generative AI, but like, what's the staying power? Like, is it here to stay in the fashion world? Like, how do you see like the future of this technology?
I think it's going to disrupt every single industry, every single function within business. So take law, I can write a contract now really easily. If you are in accounting, and you're looking at all of the administrative tasks. There are civil servants in government today who are using AI capabilities to sift through all of the contracts and the documentation and things like that. So it brings about a huge amount of efficiencies. So that's a positive. Another positive is for creators, and I would say that I'm very much a creative technologist. Anyone who's a creative, you've got a huge amount of imagination, but sometimes realizing your creative visions can be expensive. These technologies can democratize creativity. So you can create a film, you can create a game, you can create a fashion line in a fraction of the price. So it's supporting the creative economy. On the flip side, the difficulty is that we'll have so much content, synthetic content being created. And whereas before we had the transition, say, from painting to photography, and painters were outraged about photography, this isn't a new form of art. And then you had two distinct different categories. Now people are looking at this and saying, is generative AI like that era? Would you be able to say that this is authentic data and this is synthetic data and tell the difference? Unfortunately, unless someone is saying that this is synthetic data, it's going to be really hard to tell if this photograph in a magazine is created synthetically or if it's real or not. So there are definitely more challenges, and the market will be flooded with content. So does that therefore mean that the value of the content goes down? If anyone can create a book using generative AI and we all become an author and we all using the trained data set, how do you actually tell if someone is intelligent and an expert or if they're just using ChatGPT?
That is so interesting, Frankie. What are we seeing, like, fashion brands in particular doing? How are they using this? Is it just purely for, magazines and things like that for ease, or are we seeing collections coming out? What can we expect to see?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're definitely different use cases. So one is creating fashion photography, so for magazines, or conceptualizing new product lines. They can, as a fashion brand, go to market, and even if the product isn't made yet, maybe A/B test what's the appetite for these new forms of fashion, and equally collaborating with a community like Fashion AI by collaborating with creators and doing competitions. You can then create capsule collections. They might be slightly more avant-garde types of fashion, where some of the materials aren't particularly realistic, might incorporate 3D printing, materials that don't exist yet, influences from games, that sort of thing. So product design is definitely one use case. You can also use generative AI to just go straight into the materials and the prints and the fabrics, and create new patterns and things like that. And then you can also animate the images. So say you've got an image of a woman walking on the catwalk, you can then animate it to look like it's an actual fashion show. And then last but not least, we've got the 3D world. So you can use generative AI to come up with a concept of a pop-up store. So the concept of the store, the interiors, you can then build that out into a metaverse style immersive shop experience. You can use generative AI again to create the fashion, which could be physical fashion or it could be digital fashion. And then you can also create the models and the characters. You can then create those characters. And then the AI piece is turning that character into a non-player character that's either powered by a chatbot. Chatbot is powered by logic, so you ask a question, you know what the answer is going to be. Or if you bring in AI and generative AI, you can power that by conversational AI. So you can ask that character a question you have no idea what it's going to respond, but it will be responding hopefully based on trained data from the brand. So it will tell you, these are the latest products, these are the latest trends, this would suit your body figure, etc., etc. So that those are some of the use cases, but we're still really in the early days and we haven't seen many examples of this yet.
How about in terms of like full-blown campaigns that either a fashion house or brand or even startup have created using this technology?
Yeah, you can definitely do campaigns. So because the training data is based on, you know, images that we see, you can say create a perfume ad with Johnny Depp in it, and then you can use Photoshop, because with generative AI the issue is it won't necessarily be able to create a Coca-Cola can, so you might need to combine generative AI images with something like a Louis Vuitton handbag that you don't want it to make any creative interpretation of. You want that bag. But then because you're creating that, you're potentially infringing on the name, image, and likeness of Johnny Depp. So you can only really use that internally. To do that externally, you still need to have permissions, and that's why there are so many IP issues with generative AI. I can go ahead and create a campaign with Johnny Depp wearing, you know, a Calvin Klein suit, for example, even though I don't have access to Calvin Klein or Johnny Depp.
I mean, crazy. Go for it, Joh.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, have there been any concrete examples of this generative AI being used like recently?
There have been a couple of, it's difficult to say because some people will publish things on LinkedIn and they'll say, oh, this is, you know, a front cover of Vogue in Singapore, for example. And then you discover later, actually, this was just a piece of concept art. Or they might create a fake campaign. So I've seen, or a fake brand collab where it's IKEA and Patagonia doing a brand collaboration. And I think creators are becoming more and more aware of what's lawful and not. So they might put a disclaimer, they might say that this is a fake brand collab, but others might, you know, pass it off as if they actually have been working with these brands because they want to get the attention of brands and start to work with them. So I can't say for certain. I can definitely send you some examples afterwards. But yes, it's difficult to know what's real and what's not real in this world.
I mean, you touched on it just a moment ago, but from a legal perspective, it's just an absolute minefield. And unfortunately, at the moment, there are just more questions than answers. Obviously, as you kind of mentioned, what we do know is that generative AI will continue to have such a significant impact on intellectual property and trademark rights. And I think what we will eventually see is that the system will have to evolve to accommodate these changes and to make sure that people can protect and enforce their rights. I suppose one of the main challenges we're seeing in the copyright field is how we determine who owns a right. So if you generate a design, for traditional design, say you would, the methods on AI are kind of different to what you can do now. So if you're instructing an AI or an algorithm to do that for you, who owns that? Do you own that? Does the platform that you created it on own that? Like it's very tricky. I think what we're advising our clients to do in the first instance is to check the terms of business of the platform that they're using to see how the land lies there. However, that is a really blurry line. From a trademark and design perspective, I think one of the main challenges is protection of these rights in a world where AI can create trademarks or designs that really closely resemble existing ones. It can be challenging for their brand owners, therefore, to know whether whether the uses that are being made are genuine, have they been authorised by them, is it a counterfeit, and for consumers as well. So it's very tricky. And I think what we're advising our clients to do is to make sure that they have protection of their brands for the real world physical item, so your handbag, but also in relation to virtual goods, your virtual handbags, your virtual clothing, so that therefore you're well placed to take action and you have rights in that field. But it is a very, very tricky area.
And yeah, I think my advice would be to record the process of how you made things.
Absolutely.
And that's then your evidence, your sort of legal evidence. And then, as you say, do your due diligence. If you're using Midjourney, if you are on the free plan, you don't have a license to do very much with the content. But the pro plan, you can use it commercially, but it doesn't give you generative AI. You don't have copyright of that at the moment. It depends on the jurisdiction. But what you can do is just use these tools for creative conceptualization. If you have an image in your head and you're finding it hard to communicate to your team, this is what you're looking to do, I would use generative AI as a communication tool so that you're all on the same page, then use that as inspiration, and then create the physical prototype and trademark that. Ultimately is what I would be looking to do. The second part of this is, that's on the output side. So what's created, can you copyright that? Can you own it? Can you monetize it? But then there's the actual model, and then there's the training data as well. So that's complicated as well. So the AI model, there are two classes. There are the open source ones, and then there are the closed source training models. So for example, Stable Diffusion have had lots of lawsuits to them by artists saying, you have stolen our artwork, all of this sort of thing. And you can go and you can look up the training models. You can see what the training data that's being used. And they will be liable for not only the training data, but how it gets used. So although open source is great, it will allow people all around the world to have access to this technology. They will not be able to cover the legal costs that come in eventually. So eventually you're going to have monopolies like, OpenAI, who are sort of taking control of this whole space. And then the training data side is, you might have a base model, like, the sort of OpenAI model, and then you might want to fine tune that. So if you're Disney, if you are Louis Vuitton, you're Gucci, you can fine tune that with your images from your brand and create something that internally you can use to create and become more efficient at creating fashion. But at this stage, again, lots of legal issues. So even if you own all of the training data to begin with, you create all of the AI models, still the output, you can't say that that is copyrightable just because of the law right now. So there needs to be a new class of IP, which is generative IP, which says this is the output, this is a training model, so this is the AI model, and this is the training data. And it needs to take into account all of that and put that into a license somehow. And this is like hundreds of thousands of pieces of data that's creating that one output. So that's where it becomes complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it is really, really fascinating and very helpful for those that are interested in this area and kind of don't know, how to maneuver through the minefield, so to speak. What about some recent like disputes involving fashion houses or brands that have been either made some waves, or that that maybe haven't kind of flown under the radar?
Yeah. So I would say, even within the NFT space, people were creating digital goods, Chanel handbag, they're turning it into NFT. And that was meant to be the panacea. Okay, because it's an NFT and it's on the blockchain, it means I can own this, I can sell this, we can track it forever. However, they were still originally infringing the trademark of Chanel. So there are cases like that. So that's on the NFT side of things. But I do think that NFTs and blockchain will be part of the solution for sure. And then part of the solution as well will be to do with attribution and saying, transparency about the synthetic data. This is the synthetic data, this is the AI model, this is all of the training side of things. So then you can, pay the data providers who have provided the data for that model. It's still an evolving space. No big fashion brand has really experimented in this space yet. But I'm sure we'll see kind of lawsuits arising as people start to commercialize this.
Well, what about the Meta Birkins controversy? I don't know, maybe if you could provide some kind of background for those that are not, even though it was in the news quite a bit, but still.
So on the Meta Birkins case, we had an artist, Maison Rothschild, who created lots of Meta Birkins in various different, patterns with furry ones and everything like that. Ultimately, the case was decided that Hermes were able to enforce their rights on that against the Meta Birkin NFT, and that was a massive win for Hermes. However, that is a cautionary tale because the Hermes Birkin brand is so big and so reputable, and even though Hermes didn't have registered rights for their virtual handbag and things like that, and the US system is very different. It might not have been decided that way in the UK necessarily. They were able to kind of assert that their reputation was such that they could kind of take action against that use of the Meta Birkin in relation to the NFTs. I think that's a bit of a cautionary tale. I think lots of massive brands would be able to enforce their rights. I worry more about the smaller brands relying on that when they may not be able to show that massive reputation. But that was a really interesting case against artistic expression, creating this artwork that was kind of using based on the famous Birkin bag, and the actual rights in that bag. So I'm sure all of our listeners are well versed in that case. It has been really covered in the media. But yeah, that was a really fascinating one.
And kind of to add to that, do you see a lot of your bigger clients starting to trademark the virtual versions of their products?
Yeah, particularly our fashion clients are making sure they have protection for their virtual goods. So retail store services selling virtual goods or virtual handbags, virtual clothes. So we just kind of make sure that we tailor their specifications for their new applications, just to make sure that they are covered. And it only seems to be our bigger fashion clients that are doing that at the moment, but I think it will certainly become more of the norm as this kind of progresses.
Right. Yeah, very, very interesting and very important. But like you said, even though the smaller brands might not have the funds or whatever to trademark, they could still pretty much win a case if they had a similar situation like the Meta Birkin's case. Is that so?
I mean, we don't know. Yeah, it's very tricky to tell because there's been such little case law. I think that it could potentially be tricky if they haven't got the massive reputation to back that, to show that they've got such a reputation in that particular mark that people would kind of be deceived. Obviously, you've got your massive brands, your massive fashion houses that could show that that's people were passing off their brands. I think some of the smaller brands may struggle to do that, but who knows? This is such an emerging area. We just have to wait to see what case law comes through.
But I think that's a really interesting case because it's both sides of the coin needing to protect what they're creating. It's the big fashion brands, but sometimes it's also the small creators. And often what you want to do is protect everyone so that people can come together and collaborate and work together and all be remunerated fairly. So you will see brand collaborations between a brand and a cool influencer. But there have been cases where a brand rips off, the style of the influencer or that up and coming artist. So, as I said, both sides need to be protected. And what I would love to see in the future is lots of creatives being able to band together and jointly create creative projects. So if you look at, a metaverse style world, you might have multiple creatives creating the space, someone creating a character, others creating some fashion over here. And that's like an indie fashion game, let's say, but that's all IP. And you need to be able to track that, how it was created. Was it created with AI? Was it created sort of using traditional methods, and then to remunerate people accordingly.
Are there collectives like this?
There definitely,
forming?
I've seen a couple of DAOs that work like this, like creator communities that will come together. They will create like an indie game, that they might launch NFTs first, almost as the concept for the game and the characters, and then they put the monies back into the project to then either build the game themselves, or as a collective they might decide they don't have the skills to do it themselves, but they want to employ this game studio to then take it further. But because they were the originators of the concept and the DAO, they all have skin in the game, and they have voting rights in the direction of where that game is taken. So I think that there might be a new segment of like fashion games, where you've got kind of the gamified mechanics, you've got the creator community creating that game, but it's less about games to do with violence and, you know, these things that you associate with teenage boys, because, you know, around about 50% of gamers are women, and they probably want, you know, fashion in games or some other experiences, and I'm really excited about that in the future.
I'm excited about having to fight for access to my son's PlayStation. But no, in all fairness, that sounds like some tricky license agreements, potentially some very robustly worded license agreements that could be coming our way in the future.
That's right. So I guess one last thing that I'd like to talk about in this particular part is this a World Trademark Review investigation. This is quite new to me, so I don't know, Becca or Franki, if you would like to tell a little more about how they've uncovered a large number of logos being sold on OpenSea, the NFT marketplace.
I'll leave it to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, this
My
is
goodness.
new to me, so.
This is completely hot off the press. No, I think we just have to wait and see what happens. As you say, it's very I'm very interested to see the outcome of it, actually, because we haven't actually seen, as far as I'm aware, anything like this come through before. So I don't have anything to update or add, but I'm eagerly awaiting to see what happens here, because I think there could be a real scramble as this unfolds. Sorry, I don't have much more to update.
Yeah, and I think the thing is about, you've got tech innovation that moves at the speed of light.
Yeah.
And traditionally, you know, law and regulation is quite slow moving. But actually in this space, because of, you know, as you say, case law, all sorts of cases, it's happening in real time. You might get emails coming through from different platforms saying, we've updated the terms of services, and you're already using Zoom, you're already using LinkedIn, Adobe, and you don't even look at it twice because you just want to continue using the service. You've got a lot of data in there, you're paying for it. But actually, suddenly they're training their own generative AI with your data. Some tools, so transparency is going to be really important, reading the terms and conditions, and hopefully brands will be able to delineate and say, we're not going to blanket and force all of our customers to opt into this. We're going to give them an opt-out option. So ChatGPT, for example, you can use it and you can opt out of it using your prompts, using the data that you're putting into ChatGPT. So yes, awareness is important for all consumers, all professionals, to move forward and protect themselves.
So maybe now we can well, I guess we can continue talking more about these like legal and IP aspects.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, from my perspective, we have more questions than answers. I wish I could kind of give more concrete answers, but at the moment we just really have very little to work with. So it's, from my point of view, it's very exciting to see what comes through next and who else brings these matters before the court, so we can get some case law on file and know where we stand. But it is a very exciting time. It's really great to work in this area, I must say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last part is there's something called explainable AI. So as AI creates things, it can explain why it's created that output. And AI in general, it's got baked into it all of our biases, all of our past, past intelligence and everything. So we just need to be really careful about what we're putting into it. And, as you said, it's just a fascinating space. So I can't wait to see what legal tech startups emerge in this space, because I think there's definitely room for more legal tech startups to come and solve these problems.
Oh, Franki, thank you so much for chatting to us today. It's been so insightful to hear it from your perspective, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. We'll need to have a chat every year just to see how much it changes.
How many grey hairs we've got. Have we been sued?
I know, that's the thing. I think because this time next year things could have moved on so much, so it's absolutely fascinating to check in now and put our stake in the sand to say this is where we were in 2023. But I anticipate that the landscape will have entirely changed in 18 months probably.
We'll look back at ourselves and think, oh, how naive we were.
How young we looked. But yeah, no, it's been so lovely to chat to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thanks for listening. For more information on all of these topics and to listen to all the episodes so far in the series, make sure to visit our Fashion Hub on the Marks & Clark website. You can find the link in the bio of this episode. See you again next time on the Blurred Lines podcast.